Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon and coming back after a break. We are going to be hearing from Laura Stanton from Ohio State University here in a moment. I'd like to remind everybody that we are recording these sessions, and so anything that you show or speak will be recorded, although the chat will not be. So you're welcome to use the chat in Zoom, but that disappears after the presentation is over. So if you'd like to continue the conversation, I'll encourage you to head over to Discord, and that link is in the chat to carry on more conversation with Laura there, and her presentation has its own channel over there where you can add to the conversation. So I'd like to welcome Laura Stanton, presenting on why FCS Extension Educators should fly rainbow flags. Laura is the Family and Consumer Science Educator for Ohio State University Extension in Warren County. She has over 25 years of experience teaching and providing educational training workshops. She has a strong interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, and particularly enjoys helping people navigate topics that they often find uncomfortable and/or unfamiliar. Laura is a parent of 2 teenagers and enjoys spending time outdoors. So Laura, thank you for joining us, and you can take it away.
Great. Thank you, Molly. Thanks everyone for being here. I know there was just a session right beforehand, so there's a chance other people will join us, but for those of you who are on time, I appreciate it. One of my favors to ask, and it's totally a decision by choice, but if you're willing to turn on your camera, it just really helps me feel like I'm not talking to myself and part of the community. I know it doesn't work for everybody for various reasons, but if you're comfortable doing so, I would love to see your fabulous faces as we go through this hour together. Like Molly said, my name is Laura Stanton. My pronouns are she, her. And my title for our workshop today was why FCS Extension Educators should fly rainbow flags. But as I was working on this morning, don't tell anybody, I realized I really should change it to why all extension educators should fly rainbow flags. And my own like egocentrism as being an FCS agent, or educator, was thinking about FCS educators, but the truth of the matter is that we are all in this together and we should all be flying rainbow flags. So hopefully some program areas struggle with this a little bit more than others. I won't mention any names, but it's something that we all can work on together with our colleagues. Just to give you a little information about myself, I am a FCS educator in Southwest Ohio, so I'm just north of Cincinnati, a little bit south of Dayton, to give you an idea of where I am in Ohio. And just share a little bit about me. Like Molly said, I have 2 teenagers, so I have a recent picture of them, but also older pictures from pride parades of past. And I've also always been very closely involved with GLSEN. And if you're not familiar with GLSEN, it stands for the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, where we work with schools to be more welcoming. And one year we had George Takei come and speak. I got to meet him and his husband, Brad. So that's one of my highlights, is meeting a famous person. So we have a small group here, which is wonderful. I hope that you all will be involved and we can have a very informal and casual conversation and workshop together. But I'd love for you, if you're willing and able, to share and introduce yourself. This is a super manageable group. So if you're willing to tell us your name, where you live, what you do professionally, if you are involved in extension, and then if there's any particular reason you chose this workshop or anything in particular you would like to get out of it. So anybody want to volunteer to go first, you can just raise your hand and unmute yourself if you're willing to do that, and then we all get the signal. All right, I see Madeline.
Hey guys, my name is Madeline Jones. I'm from North Carolina 4-H. I work in Yadkin County, and I attended this workshop because I would like to know, just reaffirm some of the things I already know. So excited to be in here.
Great, thank you. Welcome from North Carolina. Sarah, I see Sarah's got her hand up, and then Trina will come to you.
Awesome. I'm Sarah. I'm with University of Maine Cooperative Extension, and I'm here just to learn from each other. And as Madeline said, reaffirm some of the things I already know, but hopefully learn a few more things about how to support families and kiddos that we work with.
Great, thank you, Sarah. There's a Trina.
Hi, I'm in Hood River County in Oregon, and we're a unique town in that we're small, with the urban part. We're about 10,000 people, being very, very liberal minded, and then share with a very rural area, and I'm a 4-H agent. And so just looking for more ideas to be able to marry even parts of our community together here that's more divided.
Yeah,
Glad to have you all here.
sharing. Thank you. Thanks, Trina. Let's see, everyone's moving around. Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Heidi?
Sure. My name is Heidi. I'm in central Minnesota. I'm a 4-H extension educator here in Stanton County. I'm here because I moved from the metropolitan area just about a year ago. I grew up there, but it's like to do one of the things that I was able to do down in the city, but we just know it's a very different area that I live in, and I don't know, you feel a lot of times like people can just look at me and say like, oh, she's this and she's that, and it's like you don't even know me, but I feel, sometimes I feel like I'm asking for things by putting up even putting up a Democrat sign in my yard. I was like waiting for somebody to do something to it, but so yeah. I just need like a little kick in the butt to be brave and do what I know.
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you, Heidi. We've got a couple more people. Yeah.
Can I go next? Because I feel such solidarity with what Heidi just said. I am Molly Toppy. I work for West Virginia University Extension as a 4-H agent in Wetzel County. And I feel you, Heidi. I feel like I may be the only person in this county who voted Democratically. I know that's not true, but sometimes it feels like it. And so it's nice to join some other like-minded folks. And I've already talked with Laura a little bit, and you all are really going to enjoy this session.
Thank you, Molly. Who'd like to go next?
My name is Jean Janah, and I work in Monroe County as a program coordinator in Michigan. And I thought the topic was interesting, and I look forward to learning additional information.
Great, thanks, Jean. And then I think Kat might be our last person.
Hi, I apologize. I just had my wisdom teeth taken out, so talking is a little hard.
Yeah.
I'm from Livingston County, Michigan, which is a very conservative rural county. I'm the 4-H program coordinator there, and I am looking to make waves in my county. So always looking for opportunities and knowledge.
Great, thank you. I hope you have speedy recovery from those wisdom teeth. Did I miss anyone? I think I got everyone. All right. Well, I appreciate the solidarity because I said I'm from Southwest Ohio, and I just did a research project recently, and I think 76% of the people in my county voted for Trump in the last election. So I'm not talking from a liberal bastion in Ohio. So one of the things we'll talk a little bit about is just like low risk, high risk things for us to do. But one of the things that I try really hard to kind of channel in myself is a long time ago, I had a great friend in graduate school, and she identified as queer, and we were doing some things together. And she said something that will just always stick with me. And she just said, "You are such a perfect ally." I'm married. I identify as heterosexual. I identify as cisgender. And I look like I do. I'm like a suburban mom. And she just said, "That's your superpower. Like, you're a superpower ally. And for you to do things, there's a lower risk, right, than certain people, certain identities, certain age groups. I'm now middle aged, so I have some privilege that comes with that." And so some days it's similar to what you all have already mentioned, like put on my big girl panties and decide I'm going to post something on social media or offer a workshop on supporting LGBTQ youth. And, you know, I still get that. What's going to happen? Is the phone going to ring? Am I going to get a nasty email? But I tell myself, and I hear Ramona's voice, is I'm the right person to do this, right? This is part of the privilege I have, is to be strategic, recognize it's way lower risk for me to do this, and be an ally. And I think that's a big part of what it means to be an ally. Another thing that I just want to say, a lot of people said, you know, we're already feel like we're in this welcoming, safe space in community. And a lot of us are doing amazing things, but sometimes you just need to hear that support, right? And get support from people. And I said to Molly, she was saying, you know, some of the people come into the summit are, you know, they're already members of the choir, but we all need practice. If we're in the choir or not, we need practice. So this might just be a practice workshop for all of us. I am very informal and casual, so at any time, please feel free to stop me. I have these old Zoom reminders about just good housekeeping tips, but we've been doing Zoom for so long, I think everybody knows this. But feel free to use those reaction, like raise your hand if you want to. Feel free to use the chat. Molly's looking at it, and I have a little part of my screen devoted for the chat, so I'll keep an eye on that as well. And I do want to share with you at the end, there will be a quick evaluation survey. A good colleague of mine always says feedback is activism. So please feel free to take the time to fill that out. It really helps me in the future make sure I'm doing some good things. And another housekeeping thing I just want to mention is I always, when I do a Zoom, I hang out. I'm like, I'll be here as long as you want to be. We can keep talking. But that's not going to happen today for two reasons. One, I have mom duty, and I have a son who has a award banquet that starts right at 5:30. So I need to run to that. And the other is because there's another fantastic webinar that starts at 5:30. So I am going to be really super time conscientious. But please, 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 if there's any dialogue or questions, or you want to keep conversing, there's Discord. If you're old like me and that feels really unfamiliar, email works. You can pick up the phone, whatever your communication mode of choice is. But please don't feel like at 5:30 you'll never see me again, because that would be the opposite of what I'd really like to happen. Just remember, as far as creating a brave and a productive space here, if you can just be present, that just helps everyone in the group. Be open to other people's opinions and views. Lean into discomfort if you're feeling any discomfort. And I love these sayings, what's said here stays here, except when it's being recorded. So keep that in mind. And then what's learned here leaves here. So please, anything that's new or something that you want to share, feel free to do that. I'm also noticing we're getting some newcomers. Cora, looks like, has joined us, and Alicia. If you're willing to let us know where you're calling in from and what your position is, if you are in extension, that would be wonderful. And I'm just going to keep going for sake of time. All right. So one of the questions, and when I first started thinking about this, was why FCS educators? Why is it important for us to support LGBTQ youth? And there's actually a creed. I bet 4-H has a creed too, but any FCS has a creed. And I just shared it on here, but I love the first line is my primary concern is people. And that means all people, and including people that get attacked or get slighted or get ignored or feel invisible. And so that makes it even more important, in my opinion, to talk about and support, affirm LGBTQ youth. Our creed also says that we should empower individuals, families, and communities to meet their needs and goals. And again, that means all people, all communities, all families, and all individuals. In Ohio, we talk about in FCS that we have 3 main kind of content areas. It's healthy people, healthy relationships, and healthy communities. So empowering and supporting LGBTQ plus folks is part of that, and also cannot be ignored. And then there's also an Extension Educators creed, and I got this from ESP. But one of the things it says, I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their right to make their own plans and plan for the happiness of those they love. That sounds inclusive to me. And that's how I'm gonna keep it, thinking about it in that way. Let me look at chat really fast. I see Cora is from Minnesota. Welcome, Cora. Alicia, hopefully I'm saying that right. It's from Maine. Hey, hi, how are you? Welcome. And then those are just people. Okay, and then I think Elliot also. Elliot, if you're just joining us, if you want to tell us where you're joining us from and what position you have, that would be lovely. Just a couple of lighthearted things that I just try to remind people is, you know, life is really about perspective, right? So I love this rhinoceros artist whose every single picture he draws has a horn, right? Because that's his perspective. And all of us have a horn, whether it's visible or not, right? I wear glasses, but I also have an invisible, you know, set of lenses of how I look at the world that is based on my personal perspective. So it's just important to remember that. In that same vein, this is just a reminder, right, that we approach things and we might think we know with absolute certainty what we're looking at. And the truth of the matter is it comes back to that perspective. So just yesterday, I was like on social media and I saw this quote and it really struck me, but it just said, when you replace judgment with curiosity, everything changes. And I am a naturally curious person and I love curious people and kind of thinking outside the box. And I think that's a really interesting trait to lift up, is curiosity over judgment. Something I saw said, you know, judgment's an exclamation point and curiosity is a question mark. So that open-mindedness of just being curious and not judging. All right, I'm looking, we have another Minnesotan. Elliot, welcome. I lived in Minnesota for 3 years, so I still like to bring out my Minnesota accent every once in a while. Go Minnesota. But yeah, so that whole idea of just being curious, I think is super important. And even when we work with youth, ask if what they're asking is really a judgment or is it really a curious question or statement. I think that's a good way to think about it. So just a few things to keep in mind. I do, because I am an FCS person, I think about developmental issues. So for some of you, if you remember way back to Psych 101, right? You remember Eric Erickson, and he had all of his stages of development. But when we're talking about 12 to 19-year-olds, I didn't remember this, but the stage that they're in, his terms for it were identity versus role confusion. So when we're working with youth, under the best of circumstances, they are dealing with that whole push and pull of who they are, who they want to be, who people think they should be, right? and who people might think they are. So that's a lot in and of itself, right? We all know that awkward. We've all survived the awkward, uncomfortable questioning, trying to figure things out. And that might be if you identify as straight or cisgender and it was still a mess, right? But you add on some of these other issues. And I'm looking, a lot of us look like me that have white or light skin, but you can add on issues related to ethnicity, culture, religion, and it just gets messy, right? So it's just important to know and remember that those teenage years are messy years in and of themselves. But when you add in that kind of social, ecological, or human ecology viewpoint or perspective, I just think it's so interesting. And again, I get into that whole like kind of curiosity thing. But I'll just share with you, my daughter, she's my youngest, and she is currently right on the cusp of turning 16. And we have a really close relationship. She's been very open, and she went through a phase where she was deeply exploring the Q and LGBTQ plus. And in her example, it was questioning, like just questioning everything, questioning gender, questioning sexual orientation. And I have permission from her to share this information. But if I think about my daughter in this social ecological kind of model, I think about, okay, she's in a really supportive home. We practice faith that's very supportive. And so at church was a safe place, but for her, school was not a safe place, right? Extended family was not a safe place. And for one other, another individual, it could be very different. School is supportive, but close family isn't, right? It can look very different. And then you think about that youth model, she's about to turn 16, and her perspective is the world's very welcoming to LGBTQ plus people, right? The Supreme Court had just passed marriage equality. She sees gay and lesbian characters on TV or movie, and she's thinking, we're doing okay, right? And I'm thinking, not in this county, we're not, And so as a parent, as an educator, whatever your role is, it's really helpful to talk to youth and speak the truth to some of those things. I'm, super glad you're out. I'm super glad you're proud. I still need you to be careful. I still need you to be mindful that there are places where your safety might be at risk. But I think it's so helpful to think about it from that identity, that adolescence, and then that human ecology. So just keep that in mind. I think it's very interesting that so many of you are already in tune with your ecology, right? You know what your county's like. You know that different cities in the same county might be different. But helping youth navigate that can be really powerful. Does that make sense? All right. Anyone have any questions or comments about that? You doing okay? Okay, awesome. Also, I just want to point out to you statistics. You probably all know this, but youth are coming out earlier and earlier, younger than they've ever come out before. So again, there can be this disconnect where they're coming out and maybe family feels really safe place, but like I said, school isn't. Like I said, we work with GLSEN. When I worked with them like 20 years ago, we started a high school youth group. Now it includes sixth graders. I mean, it blows my mind just seeing how much it's changed. But again, a high schooler can get to a youth group that's safe and supportive without maybe mom and dad knowing. A sixth grader can't, right? So there's that adolescence, that age development, and that ecology that we have to keep in mind. The other statistics is more youth than ever before identify as sexually or gender diverse. So we have a lot more identities that are at play that we also need to be accepting and aware of. Also, I just want to say I mentioned the Supreme Court case, but I did a quick research just this morning, because I know on the one hand we had that big landmark case, and then on the other hand we know that the LGBTQ plus community is just getting attacked, right, from all different levels. And so I found a report, it's CNN, so someone will say that's biased, but it was CNN, just April of this year. At least 417 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislators across our country just this year. It's only April, 417. It's a new record. This is research done by the American Civil Liberties Union, and it's already twice the amount of bills that were in play last year. So just keep that in mind. And Trina, I see your comment that 4-H is often not seen as a safe place. And I agree with you 100%. And that's a tough thing to change the needle on. I think a lot of it has to do with, of course, your county, your state, but even as a national organization, there's certainly more I believe that the organization could do. This summit is a huge step in the right direction, but there certainly has been pushback about it as well. So I think the other thing I've noticed, even as a parent, is certain 4-H clubs are certainly not safe, right? And so again, you have that ecological, all these layers like an onion that we have a lot of work to do. I just want to see, Sarah said, do you have suggestions on how to navigate those conversations with youth? Not everyone everywhere is safe. Yeah, while not instilling fear in them. That is such a good question, Sarah, and I'd love to offer anyone to have comments about it. I just think there's that balance between, for my daughter, I would just say there's a balance, I'm trying to think of the two words I use, between protecting you and supporting you. And I support you 100%, but as a parent or whatever my role is, I also want to protect you. And so let's talk about the risks. Let's talk about being safe. We'll talk, if we have more time, I just always having a plan. Talk to her, like, what would happen, worst case scenario, something bad happens. What are you going to do? And just really prepare for those moments, because unfortunately we know they happen. Does that help, Sarah? A little bit? Okay, awesome. Great question. All right, so just that ecology thing I think is super important that sometimes we forget. We could also just go into the deep, like the brain of the adolescent, which we know, right, isn't fully developed, especially in young men, but it's certainly a challenge to also keep in mind. I just want to share with you, again, if you just think of context, some statistics that came out in 2021 from Trevor Project's national survey. They surveyed over 35,000 LGBTQ youth between the ages of 13 and 24 across the United States. So very large sample. And what we know is that 80% of LGBTQ youth stated that COVID made their living situation more stressful, and only 1 in 3 found their home to be affirming. And we also know that LGBTQ youth who had access to spaces that were affirming report lower rates of attempted suicide. And then finally, transgender and non-binary youth who report having their pronouns respected by people that they lived with attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected. So what do you hear when you hear those statistics? Hopefully you hear the importance of positive support and affirmation, right? What we know is it's tough being a teenager. It's especially tough being LGBTQ plus teenager. But when you have somebody in your corner providing positive support and affirmation, it makes all the difference in the world. And similarly, statistics from the same survey, nearly half of LGBTQ plus youth wanted counseling, but don't have access to it or could not receive it. It's an ongoing issue. And then again, those youth that were affirmed and were able to change their name and or their gender on important documents reported lower rates of attempted suicide. So just that context is so important. Who that person is, parents, it's super wonderful if parents are affirming, but it can be 4-H educators and agents. It can be parents of other teens. We all have a role that we can play and being that person in somebody's corner. We'll talk about how to do that, even non-verbally, right? How to be an ally. I do want to say and give a big shout out to the Trevor Project. If you're not familiar, it's a wonderful resource, but they do have support 24/7 every day of the year. They have a website, they have a phone number, they have texting and instant chat. But it is specifically geared towards youth who identify or questioning. And so they have just a little bit more, I would say, experience and more resources that are geared to this specific audience, which is so incredibly important. Elise, I said, let's see, can I turn Sarah's question a little? If you are a safe adult, how are you letting the world know? Just thinking about how it's our responsibility. That's a great segue, right? To let people know.
Your thing.
Say it again.
It's literally the title of your session. Sorry about it.
No, that's fine. I'm going to get to that, I promise. But it's a great question. So actually, it's the next slide I have. So this whole idea, right? I love that. I wear loud and proud 4-H specific. That is huge. That is huge, Trina, because it's shocking when sometimes when people see it, because they're like, oh, I didn't know 4-H was supportive. I don't know about your experience, but my personal experience is I know the Girl Scouts are supportive, right? Girl Scouts have done a lot, I feel like, to be very supportive and market their inclusion. 4-H, not so much. But when you see the stuff and the gear, you're like, whoa, look at that. So that's awesome. And I don't know if you all know, there's definitely a store where you can buy 4-H Pride apparel. Since I'm not in 4-H, I don't know it off the top of my head, but you all know it. Okay, you're all shaking your heads. Cool beans. So I'm sure these all look familiar to you, but those symbols of support, I can't say enough about how much these can mean. Again, I'm going to think about my my daughter because she just tells me everything. So I feel like she's an open book. But she would be like just analyzing every person she interacted with, every classroom she went into, trying to figure out, is this a safe place? Is this a safe person? And she like just minuscule micro details. She'd come home and say, oh, you know what? I was in so-and-so's classroom and I saw a Biden sticker, right? Or I saw a rainbow flag, or I saw something. Or the opposite, right? Something that made her think this is not a safe person. But so much is nonverbal. So I don't know how well you can see it, but I do have a rainbow flag behind me. And every single time I do a Zoom, I make sure people can see my rainbow flag. It's small, it's not a huge thing, but I'm very intentional and purposeful about it. My car has a rainbow. I want people to know I'm a safe person. My welcome mat at my house has a rainbow. I have a Love is Love pillow on my bench when you walk into my house. I'm sending out messages to let people know I'm safe. Now, does that mean I'm perfect? No. Does that mean that person automatically trusts me? No, probably not. But it's just sending out those symbols of kind of hope. I always think about it's kind of like a bat symbol, the Batman, you know, the light is shining and you know where it's coming from. And if you need it, if you really needed it, you would know. But all of those things spark conversations too. Again, my daughter's an open book, so she'll say, like, you know, after so-and-so left, they asked me about the pillow, or they asked me about your sticker. Like, the people who need it are looking for it, right? Does that make sense? I'm looking at the chat really fast. I see somebody has a Stonewall shirt. Good, good, good. We need to educate our youth, though, about the history of Stonewall, because sometimes they don't know that history. And then just that reminder, show your pride. And I have to say, too, like, I love the Virtual Rainbow Summit, the background, but I have the crazy curly hair. And if I do a virtual background, it looks like I'm wearing a football helmet. So like when I move, it's just not a good look. So I had to pass on that, but for all of those who are using it, it looks amazing. But these are just some ideas. There's also your verbal language, right? So making sure that you don't say things like boys and girls or something that feels exclusive or not inclusive. Folks is like my favorite word in the world. If you hear someone say folks, it's almost like they know, right? They're with it. They know what they're doing. But just coming from a perspective where just our words aren't closing somebody off. Our words are affirming. And that can be even, we talk a lot about dress code. Our school, for whatever reason, has had this tradition forever where boys wear maroon to graduation and girls wear white. And guess what? Some people don't want to make that choice. And guess what? Why did that ever become a thing? So all you have to do, just let people choose what color they want to wear. Don't make it related to gender in any way. Just a personal choice. So just as kind of that, sometimes it's stepping away. And I mean, again, I make mistakes. I do things that I'm like, oh my gosh, that was not very inclusive. So if you make a mistake, get back on the horse and just keep trying, apologize, move on. But all of us have room for improvement and just thinking of things so that we aren't making anyone uncomfortable or feel like they're not welcome. If you have the ability, just even every time you get your 4-H kiddos together, have a gender neutral bathroom. It doesn't need to be a big thing. It just happens. There's a bathroom that's available that is not marked one way or the other. You don't have to say much about it, but you're sending a very strong message that you're thinking about it and you're trying to make sure everybody feels welcome and comfortable. So that's verbal language. Think about written language, especially you 4-H folks that have all the forms, permission forms. I think you all know this because we are all in the choir here. But yeah, just making sure you're not making assumptions or forcing people to pick a gender or pick something that feels uncomfortable or exclusive. I'm looking at these awesome comments in the chat. So campers are 4-H. Yeah, that's very welcoming. Doesn't exclude anybody. And I love that, Trina. That's really thinking outside the box, is making sure those menstrual products are in both bathrooms. They should be, right? That's awesome. So that's a great idea. I'm like, I hadn't thought about that. So thank you for sharing that. There's always room for improvement. I always have more to learn and grow. I'm just keeping track of our time here. The other big one is just the whole pronouns. So I love that almost everybody on here has their pronouns, and that's just a practice, right? You just get used to it and then don't think too much about it. But it's a good way to just model behavior. You're modeling things. Again, you don't have to make a big deal about it, but you're just normalizing that it's okay to state your pronouns and that you may have a preference. Kayla is not on here, but I'm assuming some of you know Kayla Oberstadt. She was in Ohio and she left us and she's in Wisconsin. She's a very dear friend of mine and colleague. But I love her email signature. She has her name, she has her pronouns, and then she actually has a hyperlink that says why I use personal pronouns. And it goes over to, she's using Wisconsin's statements about pronouns, but what a wonderful opportunity, right? She's using every email she sends as a way to educate people about pronouns. It's a great idea. So I want to call her out and give her props for doing that, because those are the little things that you do that really can mean a lot. Anyone have any questions, or how are we doing? Doing okay? All right. I'm just going to go over just really quick. We have, Kayla helped me. I have a really good colleague at the state level who was a director of diversity. His name is Leo Taylor. And so the three of us did some workshops 2 years ago during COVID that were statewide about supporting LGBTQ plus youth. And amazingly, a vast majority of the people who came were grandparents who are either raising youth who identify as LGBTQ plus, or knew that their kids, their grandchildren were gay and they hadn't come out yet to the grandparents. But there's something very, very powerful between grandparents and grandchildren that I can almost like cry, because some of the grandparents love their grandkids so much, and their own children might not support the grandchild or might not be affirming, but grandma was. It's really amazing. But sometimes grandma didn't know how to, but wanted to be. So just having those opportunities to include grandparents is super important, or any adult, right? Whether it is a 4-H educator, agent, a grandparent. Teachers are huge. Librarians are awesome. So there's just a lot of folks that we could include and just need a little bit of maybe information or just a little push, like lean into the discomfort, but you have a powerful role you can play. Go take a quick sip of water. So these are just some of the tips that we provided when we did the workshops in the past. But really provide resources is a great one. A lot of youth connect virtually, which has a lot of power and strength, because they can find a community virtually that feels very safe, especially if they can't find one in their own backyard. But there's also danger and risk to that, right? It's sometimes hard to know who those people are and making sure that they're getting good information. But one of the biggest challenges for our youth who identify as LGBTQ plus is not being able to find good resources, right? Research, we're all in extension, research-based, science-based resources. So making sure that you can provide those and have them available, whether it's on your website, whether you have them in a little display at your office, whatever that looks like, but it's really important that they're given resources. I used to teach youth about teen dating violence, and we did that all over the city at the time, and we were only talking about boys and girls dating each other. And what a lost opportunity, right? Why not refocus that whole conversation about healthy relationships in general? Gender aside, sexual orientation aside, a healthy relationship looks the same no matter what. So those resources about sex and safety, are they coming from a heterosexual point of view, or are they inclusive? It's important that the same things that we think are important to teens who identify as straight or cisgender, that we're also doing for teens who identify differently. Teaching skills, I think it's, again, I kind of go back to that context, and we were talking earlier about that safety issue, but having some honest conversations about skills. At a point when my daughter wanted to go out on the town with another young woman and hold hands, you know, totally normative behavior if it was heterosexual, but two girls doing that in the town we live in, dangerous. So having those conversations, talking about reading the room, reading a community, knowing who to trust, those kind of skills are life skills. And we focus all the time on 4-H about life skills, but having those conversations are important. Plan for big conversations. Things will come up, and this is a general parenting tip in general, but when I need to have those big conversations, my kids know, because I'm like, let's go for a ride. The car is the best place in the world to have conversations with teens that might be uncomfortable, because they can't get out of the car. You're driving, they're stuck in the car, and there's no eye contact. So we know, especially young men, the lack of eye contact is super helpful. But when you know you need to have those conversations, I encourage you, or you can encourage parents to do those on car rides. It's much more comfortable than face-to-face, where a teen tends to feel like they're being attacked. They tend to feel defensive versus that side-by-side. Again, recognize the little things. Just pay attention. Just like those teams are reading you, reading your office, reading your room, reading your house, read them and look for those little things. Look for things that might be signaling that somebody's not feeling great about themselves, whether it's body language. It could be things like self-harming. It could be depression. It could be having that hood on all the time and feeling uncomfortable taking it off. Read those things and listen to your gut. Your gut will let you know, but don't ignore them. It's important not to ignore those. Super important if we can create a system of support for the youth with other youth. That's great. Our school, we had a wonderful teacher who was an ally. She started a diversity club and she kept it diversity. So, you know, it was open to everyone. And what she found out was a lot of kids were coming to that, but their parents didn't know. And so it created this kind of tension, right? Where she had to be careful about why a kid was staying after school. Sometimes the parents knew, sometimes they didn't, but she really wanted to create that support. And again, our local library tends to be a safe place for our teens. So if you're looking for community partners, certainly think about the library. That could be a good choice for you. And then also identify and connect them with role models. And in this case, I really advocate adult role models. So they can see a transgender adult living a healthy, happy life, whatever that looks like for that person, or having friends or families that are, you know, 2 moms, 2 dads, whatever that looks like. But make sure that's part of your community as well. When we teach DEI information, I think one of the best perspectives to think about is providing windows and mirrors. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but the idea is, let's just say you have a young man who identifies as gay. So every time he comes into your home, your classroom, your 4-H camp, whatever, he should have mirrors where he sees himself as a gay young man, that there are examples of what that might look like, or he sees himself affirmed in some way. And at the same time, a straight teenage boy who comes to your camp or walks into your office also sees himself. He has a mirror, but he has that window to see somebody else's perspective. So it's our job, I think, as parents and as educators to do both. You have to have an equal balance of windows, equal balance of mirrors. And that applies for all issues, whether it's around ability, gender, race, ethnicity, color, religion. Windows and mirrors is super important. All right. Other things, just as an adult, find support for yourself, especially if you feel, you know, there's some risk involved or you're unsure or something happens at work. I've had things where people come at me because of something I said that was inclusive and they don't like it. And it happens and you're in shock, and then you kind of, I need to debrief, and I'm like, who do I talk to? I need someone to talk to. So find your people. I'm happy to be your people, but have a group that you can go to for support, or you don't know how to handle a situation, but you should be affirmed and supported as well. That's super important. I talked earlier about the importance of finding that balance between support and protection. That's important. Making sure you speak out when you hear anything that feels biased or prejudiced, hateful. Anytime we don't speak up, we lose any credibility we've been working on, right? If someone's like, oh, you know that Laura, she seems like she really is an ally, and then they see me in a situation where I'm silent when I shouldn't be, I just lost all my credibility. So again, there's risk. There's always risk involved, but I tell myself low risk. A lot of this is low risk for me. All right, and then that contingency plan. I really don't like saying this, but if you are working with a youth who you are worried about, who you feel like isn't affirmed and supportive, please think about talking to them about a safety plan. It's horrible to think about, but if they had a situation where things got bad, whether it's at home, in the neighborhood, at school, and they needed a safe space, how can you help them with that? We talk about making sure teens have a go bag that's got some money in it, it's got some clothes, they could crash somewhere on somebody's couch, but that they have a plan. And again, teenagers without that frontal lobe don't often think about things and the unexpected, but that can be something we do as an ally and an adult. And then finally, keep learning. Don't give up on the learning, because that's, oh my gosh, things change so fast, right? At the speed of light. So just make sure that you're willing and open to learning, because things are going to continue to change. And I love that our youth keep pushing to be more and more questioning about why we do the things we do and how to be more inclusive. I think that's awesome, and I applaud them for that. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go over this very quickly, but if you haven't read the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful DEI book looking specifically at racial identity development, but also racism. And I have a quote here that's from that book, from the author, and she just talks about the fact that we all have a sphere of influence. So my big challenge for you when you leave this evening is just think about your sphere of influence and where you could do some maybe more low risk things to be an ally to our youth and to all youth. And sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's professional. Sometimes you're in a group that gives you a little bit more kind of security, right? But just think about your sphere of influence and how you can push the needle a little bit to make sure that we're more affirming and inclusive. I have just 5 resources on here, but I guarantee you could spend 5 weeks on each of these. These are excellent resources. They're national, with exception of our website at OSU in Warren County, where we've put together some LGBTQ plus resources. But there's, to me, low risk, right? I'm the webmaster. I'm going to put a page out about LGBTQ plus resources. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't ask for permission. I just did it, right? Because no one else is going to do it. And that's the message. The message is we think about LGBTQ youth and we affirm them, we love them, and we want them to feel safe and supported. So if I'm fired tomorrow, you'll know why. I'm going to put up an evaluation link. Don't feel like you have to do this right now, but I would really, really appreciate it if you do it in the future. I'm going to throw it in the chat. But you all know we get we get evaluated on our teaching. So if you would be willing to do that, I'd certainly appreciate it. I will follow up with Discord and add it again if you don't get it this time. But it's fairly quick. It's the standard OSU extension survey. So if it feels long, I apologize on behalf of OSU. But I do want to spend just the last few minutes we have together. If anyone has any questions, comments, thoughts, I'm going to put my contact information up so you can be my new best friends in the future. How's everybody doing? All right.
Thank you, Laura. And if you would email or add that somehow to Discord, if you're comfortable getting on Discord. If not, shoot us an email and we can put it up there so everybody can get your contact info. And I appreciate all the chatting going on in the chat.
Yeah, me too. I do appreciate that. Just to be mindful of time, I'll keep us moving, but please, like I said, stay in touch. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to try the Discord, feel free to do that. I'll just leave you with one little comic that I saw and I love, but it's this old man. And he says, he's in a classroom. He says, "Good morning, boys and girls. Today's lesson is on respect and understanding." And one of the kids says, "You shouldn't just say boys and girls." And another student says, "Yeah, not everyone fits neatly into those two categories." And then finally somebody says, "Maybe call us students or people." And he thinks about this and he comes home and his partner says, "How was school today?" And he says, "Great, I'm learning so many new things." And I love that. We're all capable of learning new things. And I love that the youth are challenging us on some of the things we've done without thinking about it. So keep being curious, keep challenging, keep growing and learning, and feel free to stick together and find your people. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. And like I said, just please stay in touch.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know Laura's hopping off right now, and at 5:30 we have our next presentation. What do LGBTQ plus inclusive programs look like? I hope you stick around for that one, but I'm actually going to kick you out of this room because we're going to go to a different